The introduction of the alternate shotgun has sparked a lot of debate within the ULTRAKILL community. Which shotgun should I use? Should I use the alternate shotguns? Is the alternate shotgun even good? Is V2 dead? Which variant is best? That's what I want to look at today. We'll have a look at the pros and cons of both versions of a shotgun, take a look at what each variant offers, and test out a few different loadouts to look at their strengths and weaknesses. If you would like a more general overview of the new shotgun, I recommend checking out my previous video of the quick guide to all the new weapons. And before we begin, I want to mention that this is all up to personal opinion and preference. I'm not going to sit here like some giga sweat and tell you what's objectively right and wrong because of the meta. ULTRAKILL is a game all about expression through gameplay, so it's entirely up to you what weapons you find most fun and best fit your playstyle. This video just serves to help you make a more informed decision when building your own loadout. Now with all that preamble out of the way, let's get right into it. All reliable, the shotgun, has been a staple in every ULTRAKILL player's arsenal since the game's inception, which is why this debate is so strong in the first place. It's tough to give up on what you've known for potentially hundreds of hours at this point, so let's have a look at what the shotgun offers. Starting with shotgun swapping is one of the easiest and most reliable forms of damage in the game. You get up close to an enemy, shoot, swap to your next shotgun, shoot, and repeat. This is great for taking down targets, as it deals consistently high damage and it does it quickly. You can pair this with a knuckle blaster at close range to deal even more damage. The main downside of shotgun swapping is you need to be very close to your enemy for all of your pellets to hit. That means it's great for dealing with stationary and slow moving targets like Maurices, sentries, and down swords machines. It's also effective on big targets, whose large hitboxes can soak up most of the pellets, such as insurrectionists. It's less effective on smaller, more mobile targets like the Threatenin, and can also be dangerous when you're using it against targets who can punish you for being in melee range, such as the gutter tank or the mind flayer. It's also tough to use in crowds because focusing one enemy down can lead you wide open to some devastating damage from other foes on the field. Overall, shotgun swapping is a highly valuable asset in your arsenal for dealing consistent damage and taking down key targets. Just make sure to thin down the fodder population and pick your targets well so that you can get the most value out of this technique. Projectile boosting, otherwise known as the coolest shit ever put in a video game, is a technique that once mastered becomes a key component in almost every player's playstyle. In case you're not aware, you can parry your own shotgun pellets as they leave the barrel to turn a normal shot into a high velocity explosive projectile that can clear up most fodder and deal consistent damage to larger enemies. You can combine this with shotgun swapping to do up to 3 projectile boosts in quick succession. You'll whiff the 4th shot due to arm exhaustion, but after that you can quickly get back to dishing these out. Projectile boosts deal the same amount of damage as a grounded direct hit from the rocket launcher, and due to the rocket launcher's quick draw time, an alternative combo you can perform is to pro boost, into rocket, into pro boost, and repeat to circumvent the arm exhaustion, with the drawback of rockets having a slower velocity and slightly more complex inputs. Downsides of projectile boosting include being less effective against armoured enemies like Hideous Masses and Gutterman shields, as well as useless against enemies immune to explosions like soldiers and Maurices. It can also be dangerous at close range, as V1 will take 35 damage if caught in the blast, so use with caution, especially in tight spaces. Once you learn to projectile boost, it is hard to go back. It shreds basically all of Act 1 and is consistently effective even late into the game. It takes a bit of practice and isn't always the answer to your problems, but yeah, projectile boosting's fucking awesome. Now this video is about the Jackhammer. So let's talk about the Jackhammer. So, what does the Jackhammer offer that's actually worth giving up both shotgun swapping and projectile boosting? Even after the recent nerf, the Jackhammer deals a whopping 10 damage on a full hit. For context, the electric rail cannon deals 8 base damage. This means that the Jackhammer deals enough damage to one-shot Maurices, Virtues, and even Sentries if you throw in a Knuckle Blaster punch in there as well. Full speed hits are easy to perform, with the most consistent method in my opinion being a Whiplash cancel. This is done by whiplashing to an enemy, cancelling the whiplash by either punching or hitting the whiplash key again, and boom. Other methods include slamming, rocket riding, and basically any other method of building up high amounts of speed. This does come at a cost however, as a full speed hit will put the weapon on a hefty 7-second cooldown, where the primary fire will be completely disabled. However, unlike the rail cannon where all 3 variants will be completely disabled, only the variant you used will be on cooldown, so you can swap to another Jackhammer and deal another massive hit. This cooldown only applies on a red gauge hit. Hitting an enemy in the green or yellow will not enable a cooldown, and you can still deal enough damage to kill. Notably, hitting a Maurice or Virtue in their parry window while in the yellow gauge will still one-shot them, while leaving the hammer ready to deal another massive blow. A hit from the Jackhammer will also send you flying in the opposite direction, which can make it effective for picking out an enemy in a crowd, as you'll be quickly flung out of danger. Just make sure you don't launch yourself to your death. Alright, let's talk variants. Let's start simple with the Sawed-On. The Sawed-On behaves pretty similarly between both versions of the shotgun, but there are a few differences worth mentioning. Firing the default shotgun while revving the saw will launch it, whereas firing the Jackhammer will not. This pairs well with the Jackhammer putting V1 in melee range, as the saw will deal extra damage as well as create lots of blood splatter to heal off, something the Jackhammer struggles with on its own. Another thing to note is you can juggle the saw with the Jackhammer the same as you would with a parry. The Jackhammer can only hit one thing at a time, and the saw blade will take priority over enemies when it's in range, so keep this in mind. The pump charge has a little more going on. Pumping the default shotgun will add more pellets to the shot, dealing more damage. Pumping the Jackhammer, however, will turn the primary fire into a knuckle blaster like AoE blast, which can be great for taking down smaller groups of fodder. Pumping it again will increase this AoE by a bit. But that's not why we'll use the pump charge now, is it? Let's talk overpumping, as there are some important differences between the two. Overpumping the shotgun will create a large yellow explosion, dealing lots of damage to enemies and V1 alike. This explosion can be avoided with a well-timed dash. The Jackhammer also creates an explosion, doing the same amount of damage, but with the key difference of it being a red explosion, capable of taking out the usually resistant soldiers. However, this explosion is much harder to dash out of, with far less intuitive timing. Luckily, since the Jackhammer launches you in the opposite direction, it will usually fling you out of the damage radius, capable of negating most, if not all of the damage entirely, if timed right. Hitting an enemy from as far as possible, just on the edge of the Jackhammer's range, wields the best results. Too close and you'll get caught in the explosion, too far and you'll miss the Jackhammer and won't be flung. It's also worth noting that an overpumped red gauge hit is the single highest damage attack that V1 has in its arsenal. So that's pretty cool, I guess. And now the core eject, which I definitely have the most to say about. The core eject shotgun is fairly simple. Charge the core, launch it in whatever direction you're facing, explode on impact. This is great because it's very easy to control where the core goes, making hitting core snipes and nukes that much more reliable. The Jackhammer core behaves a bit differently. It deploys immediately in front of V1, inheriting most of their velocity. This makes setting up core snipes and core nukes much more challenging with the Jackhammer. With the shotgun, you just point in the direction you want it to go, usually away from you, but the Jackhammer always has the core right on top of you. So this seems like a bad thing, right? Well, that's where the primary fire comes in. Hitting the core with the hammer will turn the core into an explosive hit-scan projectile, behaving much the same to the malicious rail cannon, albeit with a smaller explosion and less damage. Like other hit scans, the hammered core interacts with coins, which, and I'm not going to lie, is really difficult to pull off, with your timing and angle needing to be on point. And the extra damage from a coin is hardly worth it in my opinion. If only there was another object in V1's arsenal that interacts with hit scan projectiles and was much easier to hit. Oh hey! Frozen rockets are a far superior target in my opinion, as they are stationary, have a big hitbox, and when you hit one it creates a sizable explosion. The best way to hit them consistently is to aim slightly below the rocket when deploying the core, about 15 degrees or so. Aim at the rocket and fire. If you manage your freeze time well, you can hit these pretty often. But rockets don't just stop there. They behave the same as cores when hit with the hammer, turning them to a hit scan projectile of their own. They inherit their damage and explosive properties, so a supercharged rocket will create a red explosion. This means that hitting a charged rocket into another charged rocket will create a massive explosion. It's pretty slow though, so a faster, more consistent setup I found is to be riding a rocket, freeze, shoot another rocket, and then hammer them together, dashing to avoid the damage. It can be pretty dangerous as it freezes you in the air for a few seconds, and your rockets can be detonated by hit scans like Maurice lasers and Guttermen, but it does make for a decent wave opener in the cybergrind. And also, this is just plain fun. So fun that I made an entirely separate video in the middle of editing this video just to show off some of the cool tricks you can do. Oh, and I guess you can do this. So that's neat. Oh, and a few more things that I've just kind of forgot to mention. The Jackhammer counts as a melee weapon, so it can break Gutterman shields and idols. And while you can't shotgun swap, you can hammer swap. By keeping the gauge in the yellow, usually just by whiplashing, you can dish out some pretty good damage. Now, all this messing around in the sandbox is cool and all, but I think it's high time we actually took these weapons out in the field and tested out a few different loadouts. All shotguns. I know this is what a lot of people have been running, and you can't really blame them. You get to keep all the tech that you're familiar with, and it works really well for that. You can use core nukes to wipe out half the field, projectile boost to take out stragglers, and shotgun swap to finish off bigger foes. The only major flaw I can really find with this setup is dealing with mind flayers on brutal difficulty, as since they can no longer be insta-killed, you've got to rely on the heavy hitters in your arsenal to take them down. Which brings us to... This build only uses one Jackhammer, and the idea is to maximize its damage as much as possible. That's why I'm opting to use the alt pump charge here. This is a pretty well balanced build. As shotgun swapping and pro boosting are still here, I can still use core snipes and nukes, and I've got a massive damage weapon in reserve that I can pull out to take care of big targets like the Mind Flyer. The main downside of this build is that once I use the Jackhammer and it goes on cooldown, it's essentially a dead draw for 7 seconds, being rendered completely useless. With the other alternate variations, the secondary fire can still be used while the hammer's on cooldown, but not the pump charge. So how about we just go all out with all 3 variants on the Jackhammer? Well, we'll lose shotgun swapping and projectile boosting, but gain a massive damage output. With core nukes being far less reliable, we're gonna have to rely on our other weapons for dealing big AoE damage, such as the jump start. And we basically replace core sniping with rocket sniping. Being able to easily take out big enemies with the damage output we have is nice, but the loss of all shotgun tech does sting. This loadout can be seriously effective, but with the hammers being put on cooldown constantly, it can leave your arsenal feeling a bit less balanced than it otherwise could be. I think this is my personal pick for my favourite configuration. Having the default core eject on slot 1 allows us to pro boost into rockets, as well as being able to hit core snipes and core nukes. We don't have shotgun swapping, but the way I like to think about it is that a solid hit from the Jackhammer is kind of like a shotgun swap packed into one hit. I think this strikes a good balance between the shotguns, but the lack of shotgun swapping and the Jackhammer cooldowns are definite negatives. So, which shotguns should you use? Dude, I don't know. Like I said at the start, it's entirely up to your personal preference and how you like to play the game. I know I just said that 1 shotgun, 2 hammers was my favourite loadout, but as I'm editing this, I've been having a lot of fun with triple jackhammers, so who am I to give you a definitive answer? Go out there and give these weapons a shot, and I'm sure you'll find a loadout that fits your build perfectly. Okay, and before I go, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the positive reception on the last video. I did not expect it to pop off as hard as it did, and that just motivated me to make this video as good as I could possibly make it. I'll keep making these videos for as long as I'm still having fun with it, so yeah. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next one.